And Steve, from Virginia. Can you explain the Nasty Boys and Ken Shamrock hotel incident, please? Okay, so this is a famous story. And there's different versions of how it all went down. Everybody involved has at least a slightly different version of how it happened. But one thing everybody agrees on is that Robert Fuller, so you may know him better as Colonel Robert Parker from WCW, or Tennessee Lee from the WWF when he managed Jeff Jarrett, he saved Ken Shamrock's life. That's the one kind of indisputable fact about the whole thing, is that he saved Shamrock's life. Shamrock would not be here today were it not for the intervention of Robert Fuller. So this took place in 1990. It was right before the Nasty Boys jumped over to the WWF. They were working for a promotion in the Carolinas. I don't remember the name of it. It doesn't matter. Shamrock was working for the same promotion. And he was early into his wrestling career. This was years before UFC even existed. So some people may not realize that Ken Shamrock was a wrestler before he was, a fighter and then came back and joined WWF. He had done wrestling early in his career. As Shamrock tells the story, and there's been countless shoot interviews, and you can find all the clips on YouTube. I've seen them all over the years. As Shamrock tells the story, he was at a bar with a friend of his who worked on the ring crew. And the guy had either his girlfriend or his fiancée with him, I don't remember which. In the version that Fuller tells, it was Shamrock's girl. And he implied that, all the wrestlers knew her, so she was a rat, is what he's basically saying. Either way, Brian Knobbs was drunk, right? What a shock. And he admits it too. He goes, he was fucking shit-faced. He has barely any recollection of the things that happened that night. But he was drunk, and he got the whole thing started. He got the ball rolling down the hill. He was being a drunken dick. The Nasty Boys don't exactly have sterling reputations, so this is not a stretch. Shamrock said that Knobbs started grabbing one of the girl's breasts, like they belonged to him or something. Maybe he was jealous that hers were only slightly bigger than his. I don't know. But Shamrock took exception to this, and he asked him to stop. That only wound Knobbs up even more, and he kept touching her. Then he pie-faces Shamrock, and Ken had to be restrained by one of the bouncers. So the Nasty Boys get kicked out. Shamrock, though, is fuming. Okay, he is fuming, and he cannot let this go. And he knew that they were staying at the same hotel. Because all the wrestlers, all the boys were put up at the same hotel. So later on, when he gets to the hotel, he is completely enraged. And probably has some alcohol in him too, which doesn't help. And honestly, he should have just left it alone at that point. He bears some of the responsibility here in what happened. He went banging on every door looking to find which room the Nasty Boys were in. When he came to Robert Fuller's door, Fuller was booking for the promotion at the time. He answers the door. Shamrock is screaming, "Where are they? Where are Knobbs and Sags? Where are they?" And all Fuller could do is just point him in the general direction of their room. I think he maybe told him which floor that he thought they were on. The version that Fuller tells differs in this way. He claims it was 3 a.m. He was woken up by a knock at the door. When he answered, buck-ass naked, it was the woman. And she was crying, "Oh, Ken's gonna kill Knobbs, Ken's gonna kill Knobbs." And then he sees Shamrock coming down the stairs. And Shamrock asks him, "Where are they?" And he tells them, they're up on the 2nd or 3rd floor. In Shamrock's version, when he found their room, he knocked the door down. And he found Knobbs passed out face down in bed. And that's the last thing that he remembers. Because from what he was told, Sags was hiding and he smashed him in the back of the head with a steel telephone. That's such a wrestling way of describing it, by the way. Like a steel chair, the steel ring post, the steel steps. Now we have a steel telephone. But he said the base of the phone was made of steel. And from what he was told, and what the police report said, he got smashed in the head with it, knocked out cold. At which point, both Nasty Boys start putting the boots to him. I guess he thinks that Knobbs was only pretending to be sleeping in bed. I absolutely believe that Knobbs was passed out for real. He even admits he was completely fucked up that night. In the Jerry Sags version of the story, Shamrock got to their room. Immediately he jumped on top of Knobbs, who was passed out in bed. He starts pounding away on Knobbs, because Knobbs did have a black eye out of all this. And that's when Sags decided to intervene to defend his partner. Whether it was Sags alone or Sags and Knobbs together, it was probably just Sags, and Knobs slept through the entire thing. Even Shamrock can't be sure it was both of them because he doesn't remember anything after seeing Knobs face down in the bed, so how would he know? Sags claims he never hit him with a phone, he just used his hands and feet. Shamrock, though, he got fucked up badly, to the point where Fuller, when he finally got to the room, because he could hear the commotion, he said, oh boy, right? He goes to the room to see what's going on. When he gets there, he said that Shamrock was nearly unrecognizable. His head had swollen so much it looked like a basketball. The other thing that Fuller saw when he got to the room, first thing he saw, was Sags had Shamrock about waist high. He was holding him. He had dragged him out to the balcony. And he had him about waist high. He was about, like dead weight. He's about to throw him over the railing onto the pavement 3 floors down. He was going to throw Ken Shamrock off the balcony to his death. So when Fuller got there, he and Sags, they locked eyes. And Sags immediately drops Shamrock on the floor. And he realizes, oh shit, like, he's in some real trouble here. And Fuller looks at Shamrock and he goes, he's not going to make it. You got to call 911. Because, again, if you don't, this guy's going to die. That's how badly injured he was. And according to Shamrock, they almost lost him on the way to the hospital. They had to resuscitate him. He claims he was laid up for months after that. In the Observer at the time, Meltzer said he was beaten half to death and he had his jaw wired shut, but they brought him out at the next set of TV tapings and they ran an angle claiming that Fuller had something to do with what happened to him. So, maybe he was laid up for months, but he was apparently good enough to show up at the next set of tapings. A couple months later, the Nasty Boys were working for Vince. Shamrock, he eventually went on to work in Japan, so their paths did not cross again until many years later. There was a very chance encounter at an airport when Shamrock was working for the WWF. He was with Billy Gunn, and he noticed, I guess off in the distance, he sees Brian Knobbs. And you remember how Shamrock used to snap on television? Like he would get in the zone? Well, he got in the zone for real. He saw red. And it didn't help that a lot of the WWF crew, they had ribbed him previously and kind of egged him on and gotten on his case about the story. It was a very famous story. I think Steve Austin, I'd love for someone to ask Austin this one day. I think Austin got up in front of everybody on the plane once and said something like, "World's most dangerous man, Jerry Sags." And like Shamrock would just like sit there with his head in his hands. Just like stuff like that. Owen Hart was another one who I think ribbed him about it. I mean, look, you poke a bear enough times, eventually he's going to bite back. Well, now here was his chance for revenge. And Billy Gunn took one look at Shamrock's face and he knew that this was going to get real ugly. And he tells him, dude, it's not worth it. Don't do it. But he went up to Knobbs. He told him he was going to kill him. And Billy tried to get between them. Knobbs ran away. He found Sags. When Shamrock saw Sags, he jumped over a bunch of seats to get to him. He was ready to kill this motherfucker. This man was ready to not only end his own career, but spend the rest of his life on death row, just to get these guys back for what they did to him. And as Shamrock tells it, Sags pussed out in front of all the boys. He said, "Oh, if you hit me, it's a federal offense." And he says at that point, all the rage and the anger that he was just overcome with just washed away. Because he realized what a pathetic sad sack this guy is. But he said it was very satisfying. And that was the end of it, according to him. Knobbs and Sags, they have said that they regretted the whole thing and that it happened because of a no-good rat, and a rat should never come between the boys. So it was the woman's fault. I guess it was her fault that they nearly threw an unconscious man off a balcony to his death. Damn rats. Amazing. Only in pro wrestling. But that is one of the more famous stories and probably one of the worst ones that I've ever heard as far as the damage they did to Shamrock. Because he came awfully close to going off that balcony and, 3 floors up, even 2 floors up. If that happened, that would have been the end of Ken Shamrock.